Today we will be looking at multiplying rational expressions. So here's an example of what one looks like. And you notice over to the right side we have some hints. Factor, factor, factor. We are going to be multiplying. There's basically two different ways you could do this. You could start out by multiplying the numerator times the denominator and then simplifying, or you can try to simplify before you do the multiplication. So I'm going to show you both just to show you how this works. On the top we have a binomial times a monomial. So if I were to set this up, I would multiply the monomial times the binomial, and we would do the distributive property, and that would be 6a plus 18. On the bottom again we have a monomial times a binomial, so we would set that up and we would do the distributive property as well. And when you do that, you'll see that you get 6a plus 18. You get the same thing on the top that you did on the bottom. Since you have identical binomials, they cancel each other out, and your answer would just be 1. Now that seemed pretty easy, and you're thinking, why would I not want to do that first? Well, when they get longer and harder, that may be the harder way. You can simplify before you actually do the multiplication, and this will be an easier way once we get to harder ones. First of all, we look up here, factor, factor, factor. We see that this binomial has a greatest common factor of 3. So let's factor it out, 3, and then we divide both terms by 3, and what is left is a plus 3. So when we do that, we had a plus 3 on the top. There we go. I'll just pop it up there. We didn't do anything for the first fraction, but the second fraction, we took this binomial and we factored it. Now we look to see if there's anything that we can cancel out. Now this is a binomial. This a plus 3 is a binomial, so you have to think of it as a unit together. So it would have to be an a plus 3 that you cancel it out with, which sure enough, we have an a plus 3 on the bottom. Also on the bottom, you'll see that we have 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is 6, and we have a 6 on top. So we show that everything canceled out, so the answer is 1. One way we multiplied first and then simplified, the other way we simplified first. So let's look at the next one. Notice now that the numbers are getting larger, and if I were to multiply the top, I'd be going 12 times 15 and getting a very large number. So this one I'm going to show you how we would just cross-cancel and simplify before we do the multiplication. So anything on the top in the numerator can be canceled out with anything in the denominator, because anything divided by itself is 1. So we look up here, let's just start with 12. I have a 12 and I have a 3. Both of those are divisible by 3. This leaves a 1 and this would leave a 4. I have b cubed right here, and I have 2 b's down here, so these are gone. That leaves just a b on the top because 2 of those got canceled out. We have 2 c's right here, and then we have a c right here and a c right here, so that canceled out. 2 c's on the top, 2 c's on the bottom. We have a 5 and a 15. Cancel out the 5, it becomes 1. The 15 becomes 3. We have an a squared. One of those gets canceled out, and we're left with a. This one gets canceled out. Notice everything in the denominator is now canceled out. So what do we have left? In the first right here, what did we have left? We have a 4b times, here we had left a 3ab. Everything on the bottom got canceled out, so that we just multiply with our commutative property. So we have 4 times 3, which is 12. Then we have our a, and then we have 2 b's, so it's 12a b squared. So it's a lot of cross-canceling. Usually the problem that we make is we're just being kind of messy, and we can't read our writing when we're canceling out all this stuff, so make sure that you do it very neatly. Now here we have a trinomial. Again, we want to factor, factor, factor. So we're going to factor this trinomial. It has 3 terms, and the leading coefficient is a 1, so we're going to use our reverse FOIL. So factor pairs for 15. 1 and 15, 3 and 5 that add together to get our middle term, which is 8. So we can factor that x plus 3, x plus 5, times, we have 4 on the top, and notice here we have a greatest common factor of 2, so we're going to factor it out. That leaves 2 times x plus 3. We have identical binomials, so this top cancels out this bottom. What we have left on the top is a monomial times a binomial. On the bottom we just have 2. We can cancel out the 2, that leaves 2. So we have 2x plus 2 times x plus 5 left. And we can do the distributive property, and it would be 2x plus 10. I saw this mess here so you can see. PowerPoint did the same thing. We canceled those out, canceled out the 4 and the 2, and then the distributive property. Okay, this is where they're going to get longer and harder. Now remember, this is a binomial. You have 2 terms, so you can't cancel out the 4D with another 4D. It has to be a package deal. They have to cancel out together. So let's look up there in that first binomial. Do we have a greatest common factor? We do. The greatest common factor is 4D, so we're going to factor that out. In this bottom one, we have a greatest common factor of 7f, so we're going to factor it out. And when we do, here I'll show you what we did. We factored out the 4D. When we divided both terms by 4D, what we had left was d squared plus 1. When we factored out the 7f over here, when we divide both terms by 7f, what we have left is d squared plus 1. So this shows those two being factored. Now we can start looking for things that cancel each other out. We have identical binomials, so they're gone. Goodbye. We have a 4 and a 16. That would become 1. This one would become 4. We also have a 2. It becomes 1, and now this 4 becomes 2. We have an f on top and an f on the bottom, so everything here is gone. And what we have left on the top is just a d. This is the only thing remaining. And on the bottom we have a 2 times 7f. So when you multiply the top together, we have d left on the top, and we have 14f left on the bottom. All my color coordinating there shows things that I canceled out. So it's about being neat and trying to keep up with what you're canceling out. That's the biggest problem with this, is just make sure that when you're canceling things out, that you make sure you know it's gone. If you want to do this to make sure it's gone, scratch this out and put the 4 there. Make sure you can tell what's gone and what's left. That's usually the biggest problem. So maybe you want to scratch it out completely, or you can put an X over it just to show that they're all gone. Other than that, it's just factoring and cross-canceling where you can, and then doing your multiplication.